Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something really fundamental. It's all about the power of learning, how it changes us. You know, we often think, okay, education, that's school. But the stuff we've been digging through, it shows it as this, well, incredible engine.
Right.
Not just for personal growth, which is huge, but also like how our economies work, how societies shift, even our emotional health.
Absolutely. And what's so compelling, I think, is just the sheer breadth of it. We're looking way beyond, classrooms and grades.
Yeah.
We're trying to get at the essence of it, really, how different cultures saw it, how it played out historically, the impact on actual people's lives.
The personal stories.
Exactly. And the economics, what's going on in the brain, and where it might all be heading. It's a big picture, for sure.
It really is.
But hopefully it gives a much richer sense of, this core human thing.
Okay, so let's start right there at the beginning. What is education, really?
Yeah.
Because, like I said, my mind, and probably a lot of people's, jumps straight to school. But the material, it really pushes beyond just, the 3 R's.
It really does. Because at its heart, education is, well, it's the main way we pass things on, isn't it? Generation to generation.
Pass what on specifically?
Everything that matters, basically. Not just facts, but culture, history, ethics, even how we innovate.
Okay.
Think about it. Every society, ever, has had some way to do this, to keep things going and hopefully make progress.
Right.
So it's fundamentally about sort of cultural inheritance and keeping society developing.
And the idea that really jumped out at me was this transformation piece. It's not just downloading information, is it?
No, not at all.
It's about guiding people maybe from where they are to where they could be or need to be, helping them, I guess, reach their potential.
Precisely. It's a process of becoming. I loved how our sources put it, education as both a mirror and a window.
A mirror and a window. Explain that a bit.
Well, the mirror helps us see ourselves, right? Understand our capabilities where we fit in, self-understanding. And the window, that opens up possibilities we might not even see otherwise. Paths to grow, to achieve things beyond our current reality.
I like that. Reflection and projection.
Exactly. That dual thing is what makes it so powerful.
And this is where it gets really interesting, historically. The sources point to ancient civilizations, Greece, China, Egypt. They seem to really get this.
They did. It wasn't just a nice to have. It was essential to their success.
What was different?
Well, look at the role of thinkers, scholars, sages. They weren't stuck in ivory towers. They were central figures in the community.
Guiding things.
Yeah, shaping ideas, values, actually contributing directly to how their civilization advanced. It suggests that, the intellectual life was seen as vital for the whole society's health.
Which feels kind of different from how many people see education today. Maybe more like a rigid system you just have to get through.
That's a really key point. It feels like maybe we've lost some of that original reverence.
Yeah, reverence is a good word.
And that's potentially a big loss. Because if we could reconnect with that core idea, education, as this, dynamic, transformative thing woven into society,
we might see its power differently.
Exactly. See it again as this liberating force.
Okay, so we're building a picture beyond just classrooms. Now, let's take that global tour through the ages the material talks about. Because it's easy to think our way is the only way, right?
Absolutely. History and culture show such amazing diversity in approaches. Where should we start? Ancient India. The Gurukul system.
Yeah, let's start there. What stood out to you?
For me, it was that really deep personal link. Teacher, student, and how holistic it was.
Holistic how?
It wasn't just subjects like math or astronomy, though they had those. It was philosophy, ethics, discipline, how to live well, like a complete education for life itself.
So learning in community was as important as the content.
That's a great way to put it. That relationship and the integration of learning, it's significant. Now, contrast that with, say, oral traditions in Africa.
Ah, the griots. I found that fascinating, these human libraries.
Incredible, isn't it? Preserving history, culture, values, all through stories and songs.
It really shows that, powerful education doesn't always need books.
Exactly. The power of narrative, of spoken word in shaping memory and identity.
Okay, and then the Islamic Golden Age. That's often overlooked, I think.
Hugely. What's amazing there is the commitment not just to keeping knowledge safe, but actively building on it.
Right, they translated Greek and Roman stuff, didn't they? And then added their own discoveries.
Precisely. Huge leaps in medicine, science, math. It really shows how connecting different intellectual traditions can spark incredible progress.
Building on the shoulders of giants, literally.
You got it. Okay, fast forward a bit. Europe, the Enlightenment, thinkers like Rousseau, Locke. What's the big shift there?
Well, it seems like the focus shifts more towards reason, individual rights, and this idea that education isn't just for the elite. It's a tool for, like, social improvement, empowering people.
Yes. The idea that an educated population is key for democracy really takes hold.
And then into the 20th century, the sources say education becomes this symbol, a symbol of progress, but also resistance.
Yeah, especially in anti-colonial movements.
So fighting for education was part of fighting for freedom.
Absolutely. It was seen as a fundamental right, the key to unlocking a better future. Hugely empowering.
Which kind of brings us to now. Education is global, it's digital, it's changing super fast.
It is. But, as the material rightly points out, we're still wrestling with massive challenges.
Like what?
Equity, access, quality, relevance. These affect billions of people. Still.
So understanding that whole historical journey reminds us it's not static.
Not at all.
Education has always changed based on what society needed. Yeah. And it has to keep changing, right? To stay relevant and humane, as the sources put it.
Exactly. It's always adapting. And knowing the history helps us understand today's challenges, maybe the opportunities too.
Okay, so from the big picture, the material then zooms right in to something really impactful.
Yeah.
Individual stories. Because, trends and systems are one thing, but it's the personal transformations that really hit home, isn't it?
They really ground all these ideas. The sources talk about Malala Yousafzai, obviously, standing up to the Taliban for her education. What struck you about her story?
Just the sheer courage. I mean, risking everything for that basic right, and how her fight ignited a global movement.
It's incredible.
Such a stark reminder of how precious education is, especially when it's denied. Her story just shouts that it's worth fighting for.
It really does. And then there's Dr. Tara Trent, another amazing story.
Remind me of the details there.
From rural Zimbabwe, overcame poverty, child marriage, just incredible barriers to eventually get her PhD in the U.S.
Wow.
And now she's building schools back home. It's like this beautiful full circle of education's power.
That's amazing. So these aren't just feel-good stories. The sources frame them as evidence, right?
Concrete evidence. Proof of how education doesn't just change one life, it can ripple out, change legacies, communities.
And it makes you think. For every Malala, every Dr. Trent, there must be countless others we never hear about.
So many untold stories. People escaping poverty, finding their voice, finding purpose. All through learning. It just highlights how universal that potential is.
It really does. Makes you think about the impact of just having access or not having it.
Absolutely. Which leads us right into the next bit. Education and economic mobility.
Ah, yes. The great equalizer.
Right. Often called that. But the material digs into why it's, complicated.
Yeah. The ideal is great education gives everyone a fair shot, economically, no matter their background. But Reality's
messy. Still, the sources show a pretty strong link, don't they?
They do. Lots of studies. A clear correlation between how much education someone has and things like their income.
And not just income, health, how long they live.
It connects to a lot of outcomes.
It suggests a powerful link, even if it's not always simple cause and effect.
Definitely.
The stat that really jumped out at me was, for developing countries, every extra year of school can boost income by up to 10%. That's huge. A massive impact on individual lives and potentially the whole economy over time.
And in developed economies.
Well, higher education often links to more job stability, better healthcare access, even being more involved civically. So the payoff isn't just cash.
Right. But then the barriers. We have to talk about those.
We do. They're very real.
The cost, for one. Especially somewhere like the U.S. student debt is crippling.
Huge issue. And then there's the resource gap between rich and poor communities, unequal access to technology, the digital divide.
It all stacks up, making that equalizer idea harder to achieve.
Definitely. The material touches on some potential solutions, though. Innovation, policy changes, community efforts.
Like what kind of things?
Things like micro-scholarships, open educational resources, free online learning materials, mentoring programs, people trying to bridge those gaps from the ground up.
That's good to hear. And I like that the sources wrap this part up by saying, look, don't just measure education by the money.
Yes, that intrinsic value point.
It's worth something in itself.
Yeah.
Right. Beyond the paycheck.
Absolutely. It makes lives richer, broadens horizons, helps people think critically, makes for better citizens, regardless of the economic return. That's fundamental.
Okay, so we've done the what, where, who, why. Let's get into the how, the science bit. What's happening in our brains when we learn?
Yeah, this is fascinating, the neuroscience perspective. The key takeaway is that our brains are basically built to learn right from birth.
Constantly soaking things up.
Constantly absorbing, processing, figuring out the world.
And the sources mention specific brain areas lighting up during learning.
Yeah, networks involved in memory, attention, even emotions get involved. It's like a whole team effort in there.
A dedicated learning network.
Pretty much. And the really crucial concept is neuroplasticity.
Ah, yes, I've heard of that. The brain changing itself.
Exactly. It's not fixed, like concrete. It can physically reorganize, form new connections based on our experiences all throughout life.
So our potential to learn and change is much bigger than we used to think.
Much bigger. Basically, challenging your brain makes it grow, literally.
So learning a new skill physically rewires your brain.
That's the idea. But it's not just about the challenge. The sources stress other things matter too.
Like what?
Repetition helps things stick, how engaged you are, and really importantly, the emotional connection.
Ah, that makes sense. You remember things better if you care about them or if the experience was positive.
Totally. Think about a great teacher you had. They probably didn't just dump information. They made it engaging, maybe made you feel safe to try things out.
Yeah, definitely.
The material calls them emotional engineers.
Ah, I like that. Emotional engineers.
Right. People who create environments where you're curious, where it's okay to make mistakes, where you feel okay taking an intellectual risk.
So the environment, the feeling, is as key as the content itself.
From a neuroscience view, absolutely. The mind's this dynamic thing. Good education works with that dynamism, supports the cognitive side and the emotional side.
Okay, wow. So foundations, history, people, economics, brains. We've covered a lot. Let's look ahead now. The future of education. What did the sources suggest there?
Well, there's a lot of buzz about the future, isn't there? AI teachers, virtual schools.
Yeah, you hear that stuff.
The sources touch on that. Also, the rise of things like micro-credentials, skills-based learning, maybe moving away from traditional degrees in some areas, lifelong learning becoming the norm.
It feels like we're definitely on the edge of a big shift, mainly because of technology.
For sure. Technology is a huge driver. The potential is kind of mind-blowing.
Like what?
Imagine VR history lessons where you're actually there. AI tailoring learning perfectly to each student, using blockchain to securely store your qualifications.
That does sound revolutionary.
It is, but there's a but.
What's the caution?
Technology can't be the whole story. The sources really emphasize that human connection piece. It's irreplaceable in learning.
So the future isn't just digital.
Hopefully not. The idea is it needs to be relational too, interdisciplinary, and fundamentally still about being human.
And there's a point about not just knowledge and skills, but wisdom and values.
Yes, that felt really crucial. Are we just teaching kids how to code or also how to care?
Good question.
Are we preparing them just to solve problems or also to find meaning, create meaning?
Those are the big questions, aren't they? As we shape what comes next. It's not just about the tech.
No. It's about the kind of people we want to be, the kind of society we want to build.
And the sources seem to suggest the future belongs to people who can think but also feel and act purposefully.
That's the idea. People who can integrate all those things. And education, in that broad, holistic sense we've been talking about, is what helps us cultivate that.
Wow. Well, this has definitely been a deep dive. Feels like we've covered so much ground.
It really has.
From, what education even is, to history, cultures, the personal impact, the economics, the brain science, right up to the future.
Yeah, and what really stays with me is just how multifaceted it all is and how powerful. Shaping individuals, shaping civilization, it's huge.
It really is. So thinking about that future, all the change that's coming, it leaves you with a big thought, doesn't it? How do we make sure learning doesn't just give us skills for the future, but also actually helps us cultivate our humanity, our sense of purpose?
That's the challenge, isn't it? A really important one to keep thinking about.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.